It is 12 noon. Welcome back into Three Man Front. We appreciate Ryan McGee of ESPN joining us just a couple of minutes ago talking about the Lane Kiffin documentary that's going to be on ESPN later tonight. Our next guest needs no introduction. He's one of our favorites.
He is.
Even though, of course, they were not very hospitable to Alabama fans in Tallahassee this year. Don't know why they didn't want to read the script and understand that they were not supposed to beat Alabama.
They forgot they were a 2-10 football team a year ago.
They just completely forgot about that. Joining us now on the Higginbotham Hotline, Danny Kanell. Danny, hope you're well.
I am fantastic, fellas. Good to be back on. I was actually genuinely concerned that, you had a story of, a fan that was treated poorly from Florida State fans, because I was actually at the game, and I ran into a bunch of Bama fans. They travel, as you guys know, they travel better than any fan base. And I was as welcoming as it could be. I could tell I was getting the side eye from someone like, this
I bet
guy,
you were.
But I was like, hey, I hope you guys enjoy the game. It's a really cool atmosphere. And I know the outcome didn't go the way that you guys would have liked to, but hopefully they did enjoy a great college atmosphere, which is very SEC-like. When you go to Tallahassee, it's very similar. And hopefully the fans were very cordial and welcoming. It was. And you know what I told all those fans before the game? Because I didn't see many of them after. I said to all of them, please don't beat us up too bad. And I genuinely meant it. I was like, I just hope we can keep this game competitive, because I, like everybody else, did not give Florida State much of a chance. I thought they could be competitive, but I did not see it going down that way.
Okay, so after the game, over the last couple of weeks, we all know that it's been a palate cleanser for Alabama, the two opponents that they have played. But I have seen some of your social media posts in regards to this Alabama football team and some of the things you said on CBS Sports HQ. Where do you think this Alabama football team is right now in regards to the way that they're trying to lick their wounds and get back in battle shape as they head to the SEC meat of their schedule?
I still think they can be exactly what I thought they could be coming into the seasons and the preseason. I think they can win the SEC. I was being there in person, I was really blown away with Florida State's performance. And I was definitely surprised by Bama and some of the things that you saw on tape. But it was sort of a perfect storm. You had a Gus Malzahn coach team, was one of the greatest scripters of plays versus specific defenses that you really hadn't seen at Florida State. You had a brand new quarterback, and then you saw almost an entirely new team. Florida State had 11 starters. So enough about Florida State, though. But I was not ready to just say, oh my gosh, Bama's going to be awful. I do think Florida State's a really good team too. And then what I have just been really, I think there's such a thing as a good loss. And I know Bama fans don't think that, and even Florida State, by their standard, there's really not such a thing. But I do think losses can sometimes wake you up and sort of motivate you throughout the season. And I think you've seen a very ticked off Alabama team that's been very focused, that kind of galvanized each other, because even when your own fan base is kind of criticizing you and they're asking for your coach to be fired and they're telling you you're not hustling, that can bring a locker room together. And to me, that's what I've seen. Now, granted, the competition hasn't been great, and there's clearly some things that Alabama needs to do better. I would say priority number one would be run the football a little bit better. But I think this team still has the same talent that a lot of people pick to win the SEC. There's still a lot of NFL caliber talent on this squad. And I'll tell you who I've been most impressed with, because I get asked about quarterbacks all the time because I was one. And it's really easy to play the position when you're just cruising through opponents and you're throwing 10 touchdowns and 0 interceptions and everybody's telling how good you are. You know what's really hard? When your own fan base is questioning you, when you're getting blamed for losses, when people are wondering if you can be the guy, all the questions that Ty Simpson had after just one start, and to see the way he's responded, and this is what's impressed me probably the most, and I put out this stat that you might have seen, since the Florida State game, he's been completing 89% of his passes. He's got 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and he's had a few passes dropped. Ryan Williams dropped a touchdown versus Wisconsin. There were a couple other drops in that game. He's really close to completing 93, 94% of his passes with almost 50 attempts. Do you know how hard that is? And I know we say that all the time. A lot of guys don't do that in 7-on-7, in practice. To be able to do that, I've been so impressed with Ty Simpson and what he's been able to do and kind of putting that game in the rear view, but fully aware that if he goes out there and struggles against Georgia, all of a sudden all those question marks are going to return. But I feel really good about the quarterback position at the very least for Alabama.
It's interesting, Danny, what we think about teams and what we think about shifts, especially in the first third of the season where you start getting a better sample size and you get some quality opponents on the schedule. Georgia has not lost a game, but there are still questions around this Georgia team, whether it was a lackluster effort to Austin Peay the first half versus Tennessee where they could not stop Joey Aguilar in that ball offense. But then you see the Georgia you expect in the second half. You see Gunnar Stockton making a clutch throw when he had to. What is the fascinating matchup aspect of this particular matchup we're going to see Saturday in Athens?
Boy, there's so many of them in this game. I think more like a traditionalist in this game, where I bet historically, I don't have a stat in front of me, I bet historically, if you went out and you said who ran the ball more effectively, even if you just went down to who had more rushing yardage at the end of the game, I would guess more times than not the team that ran the ball effectively would have won the game. Now, sure, there's outliers, and sometimes you can get hot and you can get some plays out there, but it's still a physical game, and these are two very physical teams that are out there that are competing against one another. And I feel slightly better about Georgia in their run game, not a ton better. Like, they haven't been absolutely rolling over opponents. And Gunnar Stockton, while he was great against Tennessee, he wasn't great the entire game, and I'm very curious to see how he responds in this matchup. After that performance, there's going to be more expectations. I don't think Gunnar Stockton just lines up and throws it for 300 yards against Alabama's defense. I don't think that'll be the type of game plan. Now, he might run for 40 or 50. I think that's the thing to keep an eye on is Gunnar Stockton with his legs. And then my question marks with Alabama's offensive line, I don't want, as much as I've liked Ty Simpson, I don't want him to have to go back there and just sit in the pocket, because anytime you're one-dimensional against any team, let alone Georgia on the road where it's going to be hard to hear, you just don't want to have that be the case, because it puts you vulnerable to sacks, to interceptions, to getting a lot of hits. So I do think it's of critical importance that Alabama runs the ball more effectively than they had in these first three games.
Danny is coming to us this afternoon, courtesy of Bet Online. Check out betonline.ag for updated college football playoff, Heisman, and college football Week 5 lines. And so since we are talking about Alabama and Georgia, it is a 3-point spread. Georgia is a favorite at home against Alabama. Just from a pure Vegas perspective, Danny, do you like one side or another?
I do. I like Alabama. There's been, I think we're giving way too much credit for wins that are looking just ginormous because it was Tennessee on the road. That was a good win for Georgia, but I think there's a lot more parity in college football than there's ever been before. And I know, Kirby Smart's record, I'm sure you guys have discussed it against Alabama, 1-6. But, you mentioned those X factors. Kalen DeBoer is one of the better offensive minds in the game. And Ryan Grubb coming back, I think that's been a great pairing. He's a great schemer of plays. I mean, there were a lot of easier touchdown plays that were made last year when Alabama jumped out to the early lead in that game. And if you remember, Kirby at halftime was like, we saw some looks we weren't prepared for. I'm curious to see what they can kind of come up with schematically to put Georgia in a bind and sort of figure out exactly where they're going to line up, where you can exploit them. And if they do that, I think it can be a hugely, effective game plan. I also think getting Tim Keeman and Jam Miller both back is huge for Bama. That getting those two, Tim Keenan's been a force on the interior of that line. That's been something I'd like to see that defensive line hold up a little better. That was something they struggled with against Florida State. I think his presence in the middle should help tremendously. And I mentioned the run game already. While a running back is more dependent on their offensive line, I do think that is going to be a huge return to the lineup as well. So I like Bama in this spot with the points, and I don't hate them to win the game outright. Now, full disclosure, I can be kind of stubborn in my preseason picks, and what I've kind of, that confirmation bias of saying, look, Bama might have looked not so good against Florida State, but I'm kind of back all in them. But I really have been impressed with it, bounce back. And Georgia, I still have my question marks about them on their defense. They did give up a lot of points to Tennessee as well, and there were a lot of plays that were made in that game from Tennessee's offense that I think Alabama can take advantage of too. So I do think this will be a higher scoring game. What's the total? 52.5? Is that where it is right now?
Mm-hmm.
Like
It is.
I would lean towards the over. Like I do think this will be a higher scoring game. Just I think people think of this matchup and like we've described it, who runs the ball better. I still think there's too much firepower at the skill position from both teams. Zachariah Brandt, their wide receiver, has been a problem. They're able to run the football pretty effectively. Nate Frazier has breakout capability. Gunnar Stockton can get outside the pocket if things break down. So I do lean towards a higher scoring game as well.
All right, Danny, another game in the SEC. Auburn's just a week removed from a bad officiated game there in Norman, Oklahoma, taking on College Station's Texas A&M, fighting Aggies. Aggies minus 6.5 at the moment. Who do you like in this one?
Glad you mentioned that because I thought they got hosed. Now, Auburn did. I thought that was one of the more egregiously officiated games. And it's so much when you see the SEC come out with a statement and say, we just blew it, that's pretty bad. But they didn't address the fumble, scoop, and score or the pass interference. And I know they scored after the pass interference, but that was one of the worst officiated games I've seen. I kind of like Auburn in this spot going on the road. It's a big point spread. I'll take the points. I don't know if I'm quite as confident in the money line play saying they'll win the game outright. But did anybody notice how their defense played against Oklahoma's offense? Like John Mateer and company, who had been, the hottest thing out there in college football. Everybody was talking about John Mateer for the Heisman Trophy. They were held in check for the most part. And also, I think Oklahoma's defense is the best in the SEC. Texas A&M's defense is gettable. And I think this is a game where Hugh Freeze has to get in his bag. Jackson Arnold, I think we'll have to see him make some plays with his legs, but finally saw some of those receivers step up and make some plays. Another one that I could see being a little bit higher scoring, although Auburn's defense has been playing better, talked about them holding down Oklahoma, but Texas A&M's defense has been vulnerable, and this game is massive. I don't need to say much, about the stakes here for Hugh Freeze, but I've actually been kind of pleasantly surprised. I thought it could be a dumpster fire for Auburn this year. And they've been competitive. They had a chance to win that game. They were, they had a lead in the fourth quarter at Oklahoma. I think they still have a lot of fight left in them. So I'll take Auburn in the points here. And I do think we're seeing a couple things. Mention the parity. Look at all the point spreads across the board coming down under a touchdown. That reminds me very much of the NFL. Like we used to see these type of games be 9.5, 10 points, or even up in the double digits. We're seeing a lot more point spreads get tighter as the portal and NIL and rev share has spread out a lot of the talent. I think you're seeing much more competitive games across the board. I think this will be one of them, so I'll take Auburn in a point.
Danny Kanell joining us for a couple more minutes, brought to you by betonline.ag. For updated college football playoff, Heisman, and college football Week 5 lines, go to betonline.ag. You were just talking about a small point spread. How about over in Oxford, Mississippi, LSU at Ole Miss? Right now, the Rebels, a slight 1.5-point favorite.
So this was a game, and anytime I see this happen, and this happened last year at South Carolina, when Texas A&M went to South Carolina, the line was much different than I thought. I thought Texas A&M would be a favorite, potentially on the road, and they would go in there and waltz. And then all of a sudden the line is tiny, and I'm like, oh, man, was I wrong? This is one where I thought coming into it, LSU might be the favorite on the road, but I actually agree with the odds makers that the right team is favored in Ole Miss. LSU's got some issues along the offensive line. They haven't been able to run the ball very well. Garrett Nussmeier has something going on. It's been documented. We've talked about his knee in training camp. He's had his torso issue, but he's nowhere close to the quarterback he was last year. And I do think that's because they haven't been run the ball very effectively. And I think Ole Miss has stumbled into a quarterback that could be the breakout star of the SEC. Trinidad Chambliss, keep an eye on him. I'm sure you guys have paid attention to him already. But Austin Simmons, who I thought could have had a special year himself, because I sort of trust Lane Kiffin with quarterbacks. He was struggling. He had 2 picks against Kentucky. He gets banged up. In steps Chambliss, and he has taken over that job. I know Lane has the luxury now of using the injury as an excuse, but if you get that win, I don't think there's any controversy whatsoever. I think you roll with Trinidad Chambliss, and I think they're the better football team right now. I'm a little bit worried about their defense, but who really scares you for LSU's offense right now? Not much. I like Ole Miss to win this game, and I think Trinidad Chambliss is your new starting quarterback for the foreseeable future for the Ole Miss Rebels.
All right, another game outside of the SEC, Danny, and these are currently, I think, the Vegas favorites to win a college football playoff national championship. Oregon is at Penn State. They're in Happy Valley. Penn State -3.5. This Oregon team, while their resume isn't super impressive, they've been impressive in the teams that they've beaten. What do you think about this one?
So this one I think is probably the hardest one that I'm having a really hard time picking the game. I'm gonna go again. I'm gonna take the game because you 16 apps been a disaster. But Dante Moore, here's what's crazy. We were doing a tail of the tape for the Cover 3 podcast. Like, which quarterback would you rather have? And coming into the season, you would think this is a slam dunk all day long. You have to take Drew Aller. He's playing at home. He's got multiple years of starting experience. He's supposed to have this breakout year. And yet I found myself hesitating because Dante Moore has been special so far. Now, it is his first road start. It is going to be a whiteout. It's going to be at night. It's going to be absolutely crazy. This will by far be the best defense that he showed. And what I'm curious to know with Penn State, they've been very pedestrian. They've been average against horrific competition. And I hate their schedule. I've called them out for it. I don't even consider them in my top 12 because I think you have to play a Power 4 team in order to be ranked anywhere near the top 10. So I've held it against them. But as I've watched their tape, both offensively and defense, they haven't really shown anything. Like nothing exotic, not many pressures. That Jim Knowles, who was the big hire from Ohio State, was supposed to be this crazy blitz pressure guy. He hasn't shown many packages. Offensively, we're supposed to see Drew Aller take this next step under year 2 of Andy Koltnicki's system. They bring in 3 wide receivers in the portal. They're supposed to be lighting it up, and they haven't shown any of it. So I'm a little bit cautious on this one because I think Oregon's looked better. I trust them more. James Franklin's been horrible in these big games. And yet I just wonder if Penn State has something up their sleeve that they're not ready to show yet. So I'll take Oregon in the 3.5 points. But there is something about Penn State that I'm wondering if they have some tricks up their sleeve.
All right, before we let you go, I have to ask you about the adjustments that have been made from the College Football Playoff Committee in regards to strength of schedule for this upcoming season. Is this a good thing, bad thing? Where are you at in regards to the CFP and what they're doing this year?
It depends on who you're rooting for. It depends on what conference your team resides in. I am going to hold judgment until we see it. But, I mean, it started at the SEC spring meetings in Destin when all of a sudden Greg Sankey is dropping pamphlets of propaganda all over every media member's, chairs in their hotel room, slipping them under the door with, how tough their schedule is. And then it continued over. And then all of a sudden we see the playoff committee actually change their criteria with this, quote, enhanced scheduling metric, which is very vague. They don't really tell us what it means. I would love to see some transparency. And here's where I reside, because I am not naive. I am not trying to tell you that the ACC schedule is the same as the SEC's. It's just not. What I would love to know is how much different is it? Is it worth, if you're comparing a 10-2 and a 9-3, is it one game? Is it a 10-2 versus an 8-4? Or, I would love to know the disparity, because I agree. I do think not all schedules are created equal. I'm fully aware of that. And I actually thought last year it did play itself out perfectly, and I don't think there was much controversy. Now, a Bama fan might disagree, but if you don't lose to Vanderbilt or you don't lose to a bad Oklahoma team, you might have gotten in. So I do think it's one of those things where you just have to let it play out. Because I am perfectly fine if you do put, a 9-3 team over a 10-2 team, if it's pretty clear cut. And those 3 losses are really good losses and you've beaten a couple really good teams. But I'm very cautious because I'm worried that some really good teams could be potentially left out, even though they might only have 1 loss and 10 good wins, but maybe not that resonating one. But before I go absolutely nuts and berserk, I want to see how it plays out. Because I do think I would even advocate for teams that maybe 10-2 over an 11-1 if they haven't played anybody. And Notre Dame's a good one. Notre Dame is the team that I would say has the weakest resume. They've already lost 2. If they're 10-2, I would absolutely put a 9-3 SEC team in over Notre Dame, just knowing their schedule the way it plays out already.
All right, Danny, before we let you go, two teams that have equal odds, according to Vegas, to win the college football playoff national championship. One being your Florida State Seminoles, the other being the Indiana Hoosiers. I'm pulling for that first round matchup. If you're a Vegas handicapper, you're setting the line. What is the line in that game? Playing at
Ooh.
Doak, we'll say that's at Doak Campbell.
I think you have to. I think first of all, I'd probably trust Indiana more because even though Florida State had that Bama win, which is huge, there's still a part of me that's like, man, are they that much improved? Can you stay healthy? And I do think Indiana's roster, top to bottom, is probably deeper and more trustworthy than what Florida State's is. So I may or may not out this. Every year I take a flyer on Florida State. It was 151 this year, so I put a little bit on them to win the Natty. So I might be biased in that one. It's sort of a fun one. It's a homer pick, but and I would say I trust Indiana more from their pedigree. Although I do think Florida State, especially what's happened to Clemson, that Clemson game doesn't look too challenging going to Clemson. Florida looks down. That game you would have chalked up for a loss for Florida State earlier this year. All of a sudden, that looks winnable. So I do think Florida State's path got a lot clearer. So I think it's very tight, but I would say probably trust Indiana slightly more because they did it last year.
Danny Kanell, brought to you by betonline.ag for all the updated college football playoff, Heisman, and college football week 5 lines. Go to betonline.ag. Danny, always fun catching up, and hope we can do it again soon.
Definitely. Enjoy the games this weekend. Always great catching up with you guys.
Thanks.
Thanks,
is
Danny.
Danny Kanell joining us on the Higginbotham Hotline. More three-man front on this Wednesday on Jocks. It is 12:25. Welcome back in. This is Three Man Front on Jocks. Understand we had a little bit of technical problems towards the end of that interview with Danny Kanell. If you would like to hear it in its entirety, you can always download the Three Man Front podcast. So we kept rolling, although we understand that we had a issue at our transmitter, but everything is good now. So we appreciate your patience. And for those of you that reached out to tell us that we were having a technical problem, but Danny Kanell always delivers. We appreciate him joining us at numerous times during the college football season. Well, just a couple minutes ago on the SEC teleconference, some bad news for Auburn as it was announced by Hugh Freeze that wide receiver Horatio Fields broke his foot at yesterday's practice, and he will be out indefinitely. He'll have to have surgery. So if there's one area of the Auburn football team that you feel like if there is someone that is going to be out, it would be the wide receiver room because you're pretty deep at that position. But Horatio Fields, he was an individual Landrum that during the fall camp, he was being applauded by his leadership in regards, kind of being the veteran guy in that wide receiver room. So Horatio Fields announced a few moments ago by Hugh Freeze that he is out indefinitely due to a broken foot.
Yeah, and here in the early part of the season, the way that Horatio Fields has been used is he is that third option in the offense, but on a lot of, hey, you got to have it, and they're paying a lot of attention to Singleton or Cam Coleman. Horatio Fields has been a guy on some of the underneath stuff that Jackson Arnold has looked to, but that's a tough blow, but as you mentioned, Pat, if you feel good about the depth of any position for Auburn, whether it's a new guy, whether it's a guy that's been in the system for a couple of years, they got more wide receivers.
Yeah, and Hugh Freeze, matter of fact, during the teleconference, he said it's the next man up, and that next man is Perry Thompson. It's time to show he's ready and to earn it.
There you go.
So, once again, if there was an area.
You got a 5-star wide receiver.
Oh, no, yeah, the 5-star kid from last year. I guess we'll have to roll him out there.
Yep.
Yeah. Nick Savage up. That's what we used to hear in Tuscaloosa all the time.
Or like, who was it earlier? Was it Brian that said it? Just throw it to Cam Coleman like 30 times on Saturday, and it'll probably work out okay.
Yeah, and there were times where it looked like that was the game plan versus Oklahoma. The problem is giving enough time for Jackson Arnold to let Cam Coleman somewhat get down the field, or when Cam Coleman didn't have a guy around his waist like a belt with a ball in the air.
See, I just wonder, is that something you start practicing now? It's like, all right, you've been holding on to the ball too long sometimes, Jackson. When you feel that internal clock counting down, just throw it up. Cam Coleman's down there somewhere. Better than taking 10 sacks.
Just know what side of the field he's on.
That's right.
And just throw it. Throw it as far as you can.
That's right.
And he'll run underneath it or high point it and bring it down. So when we come back on Three Man Front, we'll talk to Trey Wallace from Outkick as we'll get his thoughts on the college football weekend that is straight ahead on this very busy edition of Three Man Front on Jocks.
12:32, three-man front on this Wednesday. Already a jam-packed show. Brian Edwards, our Vegas insider. In the 10 o'clock hour, Chris Stewart, voice of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Ryan McGee of ESPN breaking down the debut tonight of the many different faces of one Lane Kiffin, 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. I hope I got that title right, but a 1 hour special on Lane Kiffin. Address his time there with the Raiders, also his exit from Tennessee, and just a whole lot there. And Conrad, he would be on, if I had a list of 5 college football coaches, past or present, that would be a fascinating watch. I think Lane Kiffin would be one of those guys.
Yeah, head coaches or active head coaches in college football, it'd be hard to find anyone better than Lane Kiffin because we're all so enamored by him, right, in his history of working at these high-profile programs, and he's a great football coach, right? It's just he has a weird, strange personality go along with it. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to be watching it tonight, as I know many of our listeners will be as well.
And college football reporter nationally does a wonderful job for Fox and Out Wednesday.
I'm good. Getting some things lined up. Get down to Athens this week. Get ready for a big Georgia-Bama game. And, yeah, I'm actually looking forward to the documentary tonight. I've already – I think inside look opinion, but fan base.
Talk about the viewing when it probably it is just because after the Florida State game, you just feel like Alabama, after playing the Sisters of the Poor the last 2 weeks, they need a challenge. They need a test, and a barometer would really be able to see what you're going to be the rest of the season by having a victory against Georgia in your back pocket. You agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that, and I think I don't want to say the pressure is not on Georgia. This is a big-time home game for them. But looking at what Alabama, and it's a little bit the trip down against the Tennessee, the middle throws it, go up in the opportunity. The defense 2 to 3 weeks. Team has at the same time putting on a show to kind of kick Georgia's defense. Curious about those game. How can they get that?
At Alabama size post a question for max effort game. The importance of this game, his record versus Alabama or the lack thereof. If I'm Kirby Smart, I'm stressing to my team, you're tougher, you're going to give max effort. Let's make them quit. You can make these guys quit. Be more physical. What do you think Kirby's message is? Because I'm sure that those have been some very spirited practices the last 2 weeks.
Go in there and stick it to Alabama in the first half as much as possible, and let's see what their will is in the second half. Like that's my biggest thing. It's kind of simple, you know, when you really break it down. Georgia's defense, can they make life a living bleep for Ty Simpson in that backfield? Can they stop Alabama's rushing attack? Linebackers good enough across the middle, which I think they are. Georgia just finds ways to win games. I sat there and watched it 2 weeks ago, right, in person. You know, they found a way to win. And I look at what Kirby Smart and that message. We all remember what happened in Tuscaloosa. You know, sure, Georgia put on a little bit of fight to come back, and the game was in the fourth quarter, but I thought Alabama had put that thing away. This team doesn't give up. Georgia doesn't. And Alabama has to go out and make a statement in the first half. There are still a lot of people, and me included, like, I don't want to say like I doubt this team. I think this team has woken up since that first game against Florida State where they just looked discombobulated on the defensive side and even maybe a little bit of effort and whatnot. We could talk about that a lot, through the season. But I think this is an opportunity for Georgia also, to give Gunnar Stockton a little bit more pizzazz in that pocket. And look, at the end of the day, like it's still Alabama, Georgia. It's still a marquee matchup. This is a game that I chose to go to over Penn State, Oregon, because I think this game is going to go 4 quarters. I think at the same time, you look at what Georgia's trying to do and separate themselves again and get back on top. And I think this would be a perfect launching point for that, even though they won in Knoxville. But I'm saying at home and beating Alabama. There's something about this game, guys. I don't know what it is right now. We're sitting there on a Wednesday, but it just feels like Alabama is going to come out and test this Georgia team to the brink. And in my opinion, we go 4 quarters here. I don't know who's going to win this thing at the end, but I think it's a different type of matchup. I think Vegas has got it right with the 3-point spread, 3.5-point spread. And now let's see if Alabama can show up. But I promise you, Kirby Smart has been preaching all week long. Make their life a living hell in the first half, and let's see how they adjust in the second half. That's the biggest thing.
Yep, no doubt. Trey Wallace joining us every Wednesday here on the program from Outkick. So let's talk about the Auburn Tigers. Your impressions of what they did in Norman. I know it was a loss, but now they've got to go on the road to College Station. Did your opinion of Auburn change after seeing hers?
My goodness, they came out and went toe-to-toe. Because that one, the S out the off they should be dismissed. They really did what they were. Even though Jackson Arnold had his good plays and his bad plays, at the same time, they found a way to get that game into the last possession. And when Oklahoma was driving the field, I understand how the game ended and whatnot. But at the same time, I think they took a step. Like, I know it's a loss. You can afford a loss. You can afford a loss because you beat Baylor to open the season. You could afford. Now, my biggest concern for Texas A&M is you going to come off that high, off that Notre Dame game? Like, are you back down to reality here in this situation? I think there's a lot that goes into it. And Jackson Arnold proved to me a lot when he went out to Oklahoma. And I know fans are a little perplexed about his nonchalantness and whatnot after the game, but you got to realize that guy's been hearing that stuff for 9-10 months in regards to Oklahoma. I do think that they found a couple things. And I think that they're going to have to figure out a way to stop Marcel Reed. And to me, that stands out the most. Him getting outside the pocket. We all saw what he did against Notre Dame. And him making plays down the field. And also at the same time, being able to contain a running game. To me, that stands out as well, too. So, but I just feel like this Auburn team, if they'd have got out of there with a win and Norman, I'd have been like, all right, man, okay, Hugh Freeze is turning this thing around. I still came out of that game feeling, okay, Auburn is going to be a problem this year. Now, do I think they're going to make the playoffs? I don't know. But at the same time, it does feel like that, I don't want to say turned a corner because that's hard to do in a loss. But at the same time, you got to come out of that game and feel like, all right, we just went toe-to-toe with Oklahoma. Now let's see what we can do with this other road trip to Texas A&M. And sure, it's going to present a hostile environment. Mike Elko will have his squad ready to go. They're going to do a little tricks on offense, but Hugh Freeze has a couple tricks up his sleeve as well. And I'm very interested to see how they respond this week, especially flying home from Oklahoma, getting back on a plane, going to Texas. This is going to be one of those tests for me that I think could set up the rest of the season. Don't be surprised if Auburn is sitting around here, hanging around in the fourth quarter with a chance to win this thing. They've shown they can do it on the road.
Trey, another great matchup in the SEC this weekend, the Magnolia Bowl. Ole Miss hosting LSU. Opinions have changed around both of these teams. There's an extra storyline with Lane Kiffin's daughter dating a current player and starter on the LSU roster. Because I'll go ahead and tell you, I have not wavered on this. I don't think I will change my opinion before Saturday. I think this sets up perfectly for Trinidad Chambliss and Ole Miss. How about you?
I do too. LSU is still working out some things with Garrett Nussmeier, and I understand that he's battling a little bit of injury as well. Ole Miss puts a hat on the head a couple of times, causes him some problems in the pocket. And now I'm talking about on the field, run that football to be able to establish what Garrett Nussmeier is doing. It just feels like to me, and talking with some folks around Oxford about this thing, like they feel comfortable with Trinidad. And let's be honest here too. If they thought that Austin Simmons gave them a better chance to win this football game on Saturday, and I know they keep throwing out percentages, well, he's not 100% and blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, what if he's at 88%? Like, okay, that would be a good enough quarterback, you would think, to be competitive with LSU. They like what they see out of Trinidad. And sure, it's an awkward situation for Lane Kiffin in the quarterback room, but at the end of the day, you got to put the best guy out there that you think can win the game. I think LSU, a lot of question marks still. I think that this is a playoff team, but also at the end of the day, them being able to rush the football, to me stands out the most. I know what they have along the defensive line front, but this just feels like a game where Lane Kiffin's going to cook things up besides doing it on social media. I mean, he already told everybody to take the over, so I guess I'm going to take the over this weekend in this one. But it does kind of give me that Ole Miss is going to win this game by 10, 14 points, and maybe it's not that close with 6 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. This one intrigues me, man, because Brian Kelly and this LSU squad, they just look like they still have some problems outstanding here, even coming from that Clemson game to open the season. So I'm fascinated to see what goes on in Oxford. I'm definitely going to try to get in the stadium early in Athens on Saturday so I can catch most of that one.
All right, before we let you go, Trey, got to ask you about the big one up in Happy Valley. It'll be a whiteout between Oregon and Penn State. Is this when James Franklin finally makes a statement about this Penn State football team, or does Oregon come in there and take care of business?
He darn well better. I was at that game last year, Ohio State, Penn State, and, everybody kind of thought that would be Penn State's kind of stepping stone, and I know what they did, getting to the Big Ten title game and whatnot. I understand that part. But you got Oregon coming into town, Dan Lanning. This is an opportunity to say, hey, we are going to compete for a national championship. We do have a good enough team. Drew Aller is a good enough quarterback. I would hate to see what it looks like if Oregon goes into that game and wins by 14 points in a whiteout on Saturday night for James Franklin. I think Dan Lanning's got a good enough defense with his squad. I think Dante Moore is a good enough quarterback. Obviously, the environment is going to play some type of factor. But guess what? Oregon's been on the road. They played in types of environments like this before. Like, they'll be okay from that standpoint. And that's taking nothing away from the whiteout, because it's the most fascinating, probably top 5 fascinating things in college football, the experiences. But at the same time, Penn State's got to be able to put it all together. And that means for 4 quarters, coming out of there, throwing the ball downfield, testing Dan Lanning and that defense and that secondary. And if Penn State loses this game by, let's just say, 10 points, and we're sitting here and we're wondering, when is James Franklin going to win the big one? When is he going to take that next step? Is this a national championship winning team? I'm not trying to say all the pressure in the world is on Penn State, but at the same time, I'm saying all the pressure is on the world on Penn State, because Oregon coming there, they could easily afford a loss, and I think that they would be fine. Penn State, there's a big narrative that changes if Oregon comes in there and walks the dog on Saturday. So that's why I'm fascinated by that one.
No doubt. Trey Wallace, wonderful job. Senior reporter, covers college sports for Outkick and Fox, at Trey Wallace _ on X. Trey, it's always a pleasure and just a great visit with you joining us each and every Wednesday during the college football season. Thank you so much. Safe travels. Have fun on Saturday.
I love it. Hope y'all have a great rest of the week, and I'll see if you can bring you a little magic down there in Athens this weekend.
That sounds good. That is one Trey Wallace joining us on the Higginbotham Hotline. You deserve solutions that are built for you. Higginbotham's your one-source solution for insurance, financial, and HR services. A lot of you chiming in, reacting. We will get to the Jocks text line as we get to your text, 2050. It's a Wednesday. We are Jocks. Three-man front on this Wednesday. Landrum, Conrad, Molly, and Pat. Always a great visit with Trey Wallace. Danny Kanell at the beginning of the hour. The 11 o'clock hour. Chris Stewart, voice of the Tide, and our Vegas insider, Brian Edwards. Any portion of the broadcast, any portion of the show you miss, you can find it there at the Three-Man Front Podcast at 349-450. Mark texts into the show. He says, Moneyline winners. Dogs, Rebs, Lions, Tigers. Just to be clear, Mark, Tigers, you're meaning the Auburn Tigers? Or did you switch over to baseball there? It's been tough.
I wouldn't be betting on the Tigers in baseball right now.
How many straight have they lost? 10? 8? 9?
They're tied for first place in their division right now. It would be the biggest collapse in Major League Baseball history if they don't win their division. But you still got a few games left to go, Molly. It's okay.
After our visit with Danny Kanell, this listener texts in and says, as much as I didn't like Danny, I've gotten to like him since he's been on your show. Much respect.
I thought it was a fantastic interview.
It was.
Didn't take any shots at the SEC. I thought he was very open and honest.
Well, your Uncle Jerry from Hayden, he disagrees. He said it wasn't technical difficulties during the interview. The transmitter doesn't like Kanell either. Johnny says, great interview with Ryan McGee, guys. I love that dude. Ryan, very good. You got the Lane Kiffin special coming up tonight, ESPN, 6 o'clock. Someone asking what happens when Lane Kiffin goes to Gainesville.
I mean, based on what Ryan was telling us,
I think Ole
Seems
Miss
like
wins.
that's happening.
yeah, it made it sound like Lane's going to be there forever.
Well, you think Ole Miss wins if Lane goes to Florida?
No, I was just playing it like he was taking his Ole Miss team to Florida.
Oh, well, yeah, that would – I think Florida would love that, yeah.
Be sure to let us know who Barner Salih picks. Somebody wants Barrett's picks. I'll text him.
I guarantee you he likes Georgia. Not that that's a bad pick. I guarantee that's what Barrett would say.
Just like he liked Wisconsin to be within one score with 5 minutes left to go in the game in Tuscaloosa.
They were going to go and drive down the field with the chance to win.
Yeah.
Gavin, who's a big Georgia fan, says Dogs will score late to go up 31-28, and the Tide will get one final drive, and they'll score 6 and break my heart again. Tide 35, Dogs 31. That's from a Georgia fan, Conrad.
And I hope that's exactly how it plays out.
This one on Alabama. Alabama's played a team that torched them on the ground, so didn't have to pass. Then the second worst passing team in the country in University of Louisiana Monroe, and a backup quarterback on a sorry Wisconsin team with a scrambled offensive line. The secondary is not good.
Well, that sounds to me like you don't know if the secondary is good because they haven't been challenged, based on that person's logic.
Josh wants to know if we were implying that Florida State is better than Georgia. I don't remember the context of the conversation, but no.
I think I can speak for all of us when no, we do not think Florida State is better than Georgia.
Yes, you have my permission.